In the small but picturesque town of Rosewood, Emily lived in a modest wooden house on the edge of town. Her days were filled with hard work, helping her mother sew dresses for the wealthy families who lived in the grand mansions up on Rose Hill. Emily dreamed of a life beyond the confines of her simple world, but she knew her place. Meanwhile, at the top of Rose Hill, Nicholas lived in luxury. The heir to his family's fortune, he spent his days in the shadow of his father's high expectations. His life seemed perfect on the surface: lavish parties, fast cars, and a bright future. But deep down, he felt trapped in a world where appearances mattered more than happiness. One sunny afternoon, Emily was delivering a custom dress to a client near the hill when she noticed a dog stuck in a garden fence. Without hesitation, she rushed to free it. Little did she know the dog belonged to Nicholas. "Hey, what are you doing with my dog?" Nicholas called out, jogging toward her. Emily froze, clutching the dog in her arms. He was stuck. "I was just helping." Nicholas looked at her, noticing her simple clothes and the threadbare bag she carried. "Oh, uh, thanks," he said, slightly awkward. Their eyes met for the first time, her hazel ones filled with determination, his piercing blue ones curious and guarded. There was a strange energy between them, though neither fully understood it yet. Before they could exchange more words, a sharp voice interrupted. "Nicholas, what are you doing talking to her?" It was Nicholas's older sister, Charlotte, glaring at Emily like she was a pest. "I'm just thanking her, Charlotte." "Relax," Nicholas replied, but his tone lacked confidence. Charlotte pulled him aside. "People like her don't belong here. You know father wouldn't approve." Emily overheard and quickly handed the dog over. "I should go," she murmured, walking away before Nicholas could say anything. As Emily disappeared down the hill, Nicholas found himself intrigued. For the first time, someone outside his world had caught his attention, not because of wealth or status, but because she felt real. But what he didn't know was that his fascination would soon spark a chain of events that would ignite tensions between their families and put both their worlds to the test. That evening, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the brief encounter. Nicholas's curiosity and politeness had caught her off guard, especially after his sister's harsh tone. She shook the thought away. "He's not from my world," she whispered to herself, focusing back on the dresses she was mending. On the other side of town, Nicholas sat at the long dining table on his family's grand estate. His father, Mr. Whitmore, a stern and imposing man, eyed him suspiciously. "You're late for dinner, Nicholas," he said coldly. "Sorry, I was out walking Zeus," Nicholas replied, referring to their dog. His sister, Charlotte, smirked. "He wasn't just walking the dog, father. He was talking to some girl from the lower part of town." Nicholas shot her a glare. "She helped Zeus. That's all." But his father's face darkened. "You need to remember who you are, Nicholas. Associating with people like her only leads to trouble. We've worked hard to build our name. Don't tarnish it with foolish distractions." Nicholas clenched his fists under the table but said nothing. He hated the way his family dismissed people as if their worth depended on their bank accounts. The next day, Nicholas found himself wandering into town, curiosity pulling him toward Emily's world. He spotted her near the marketplace, carrying a bundle of fabrics. She noticed him too and hesitated, unsure whether to ignore him or speak. "You again," she said with a small smile. "Yeah, I guess I owe you another thanks for helping Zeus," Nicholas replied, scratching the back of his neck. Emily laughed lightly. "You've thanked me enough." For a moment, the tension eased as they talked about the town, her work, his life. But the differences between them were glaring. While Emily spoke about her struggles to make ends meet, Nicholas hesitated to share the privileges he often took for granted. Just as things seemed to flow naturally, an older woman approached Emily, a client. "Emily, stop wasting time with him and get back to work," she scolded, shooting Nicholas a disapproving look. Emily blushed with embarrassment, quickly grabbing her fabrics. "I have to go," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. But before she could leave, Nicholas called after her. "Wait, No, Nicholas," she interrupted, her voice firmer this time. "Your world and mine, they don't mix. Let's not pretend they do." She walked away, leaving Nicholas standing in the crowded market, surrounded by people yet feeling utterly alone. Back at home, Emily's mother noticed her distracted state. "You've been quiet today," she said gently. Emily sighed. "It's nothing, just someone I met." Her mother's face softened. "Be careful, Emily. People from up there, they don't understand our lives. And when they do, it's often too late." Little did Emily know, her mother's warning carried the weight of a secret past one that would soon resurface. The following week, Nicholas couldn't shake the memory of Emily's words. "Your world and mine, they don't mix." But something about her honesty, her strength, pulled him back toward the town, despite the warnings from his family. Emily, on the other hand, tried to focus on her work, but Nicholas's presence lingered in her mind. She hated how he made her question everything she had always believed about class, privilege, and the walls between their lives. It wasn't long before their paths crossed again. Nicholas, determined to prove he wasn't just another spoiled rich boy, visited the marketplace under the guise of looking for gifts. Spotting Emily in the crowd, he approached cautiously. "Emily," he began, keeping his tone low. She turned, startled. "Nicholas? What are you doing here? I need to talk to you." "Can we walk?" Emily hesitated, glancing around at the watchful eyes of the townsfolk. Still, something in his voice made her nod. They walked through the quieter side streets, and Nicholas spoke with an honesty that surprised even himself. "I know my family doesn't make it easy, but I don't want to be like them, Emily. I don't see you the way they do." Emily stopped, her hazel eyes piercing into his. "Do you think words are enough, Nicholas? You can't just step into my life when it's convenient for you. You don't know what it's like to work every day just to survive." Her words hit him like a punch, but instead of retreating, he nodded. "Then let me understand. Show me." Before Emily could respond, a man approached them, a figure from her past. It was Victor, her father's estranged brother, who had been cast out of the family years ago. He eyed Nicholas with suspicion and Emily with a mix of concern and guilt. "You shouldn't be talking to him," Victor warned, his voice sharp. "This family has already suffered enough because of theirs. What are you talking about?" Emily asked, confused. Victor hesitated, but then turned to Nicholas. "Your father, Whitmore, he wasn't always the man you think he is. Ask him about the land he bought from the Martins years ago. Ask him what happened to Emily's family." Emily froze. "What are you saying?" Victor sighed, his eyes heavy with regret. "Your father lost everything because of the Whitmores. And now you're standing here with his son?" Nicholas's blood ran cold. He had no idea what Victor was talking about, but the accusation was clear. The very foundation of his family's wealth might have come at the expense of Emily's. Emily stepped back, her voice trembling. "Is that true, Nicholas?" I don't know," he stammered. "But I'll find out." That evening, Nicholas confronted his father. "Father, I need to know the truth. What happened with the Martins?" Mr. Whitmore's face darkened. "Why are you asking about that? Who's been filling your head with lies? Just answer me," Nicholas demanded, his voice louder than it had ever been. With a heavy sigh, his father admitted. Years ago, their family owned the land where our estate now stands. When their business struggled, I bought it for a fraction of its value. It was legal, but they lost everything. Nicholas felt a wave of guilt crash over him. You ruined them, he whispered. It's just business, Nicholas. Don't get emotional about it, his father replied coldly. But Nicholas couldn't accept that. He stormed out of the house, determined to make things right. As Nicholas fought to earn Emily's trust back, his father secretly devised a plan to ensure the two would never meet again. Meanwhile, Emily uncovered an old journal from her father that revealed even more devastating truths about the Whitmores, betrayal truths that could destroy Nicholas's family if they came to light. Emily sat alone in her small, dimly lit room, the old journal open in her lap. The pages were fragile, worn by time, but the words were sharp and clear. Her father had written about the betrayal, how Mr. Whitmore had posed as a friend, offering to help when their business was on the brink of collapse. Instead, he had exploited their desperation, buying their land for far less than it was worth and leaving the family destitute. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She'd always wondered why her father spoke with such bitterness about the Whitmores, but she never imagined the depth of their deception. The next morning, Emily decided to confront Nicholas. She found him waiting for her near the marketplace, looking tired and burdened. You knew, didn't you? She said, holding the journal tightly. I didn't, Nicholas replied, his voice raw. I confronted my father. He admitted what he did. And I'm sorry, Emily, I'm so sorry. Her heart wavered for a moment, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. But the pain of her family's suffering overshadowed it. Sorry doesn't change what happened, she said. Your family took everything from us. And now you expect me to just forgive you? I don't expect anything, Nicholas said. But I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Emily shook her head. You can't fix the past, Nicholas. Before she could walk away, Nicholas grabbed her hand gently. But maybe we can change the future. Meanwhile, in the Whitmore mansion, Mr. Whitmore sat in his office, reviewing documents with a scowl. Charlotte entered, her expression smug. Nicholas has been sneaking around with that girl again, she said. Mr. Whitmore sighed. I warned him to stay away. He won't listen, Charlotte replied. But maybe if we remind that girl where she belongs, she'll back off. Mr. Whitmore considered this for a moment. Then he picked up the phone. Leave it to me. That evening, Emily returned home to find her mother in tears. What's wrong, Mama? Her mother handed her a letter and eviction notice. The landlord is kicking us out. Says we have until the end of the month. Emily's heart sank. She knew this wasn't a coincidence. It's the Whitmores, she muttered. But instead of despair, a fire lit inside her. She wasn't going to let them win. Unaware of his father's actions, Nicholas was working on a plan of his own. He sold his prized car, a sleek black convertible his father had given him for his 18th birthday, and used the money to buy back the land his family had taken from Emily's. When he showed up at her door with the deed, Emily stared at him in disbelief. This is yours, he said, handing it to her. Why would you do this? She asked, her voice trembling. Because I love you, Emily, Nicholas admitted, his voice steady. And because it's the right thing to do. For a moment, Emily felt her walls crumble. But before she could respond, Victor appeared. You think this makes up for everything? Victor sneered. Your family destroyed ours, and now you want forgiveness because of one good deed? Nicholas turned to him. I'm trying to fix what my family broke. What more can I do? Victor's face darkened. Leave her alone. That's what you can do. Victor wasn't just Emily's uncle, he was once in love with Nicholas's mother. Years ago, before the Whitmores rose to power, Victor and Mrs. Whitmore had planned to run away together. But Mr. Whitmore, ruthless and ambitious, had manipulated the situation to keep them apart, ultimately ruining Victor's life. When Emily discovered this, she realized the feud between their families ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. The revelation of Victor's past hit Emily like a storm. Her uncle, always bitter and guarded, had never shared the full truth. Now she understood why his hatred for the Whitmores burned so fiercely. It wasn't just about the land or money. It was personal. Emily confronted Victor that night. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she demanded, holding the journal tightly. Victor looked away, his face heavy with regret. What good would it have done? The Whitmores have always been untouchable. Your father wanted to protect you from all this, Emily. He didn't want you carrying the weight of our past. But Nicholas isn't like them, Emily argued, her voice trembling. He's trying to make things right. Victor's eyes narrowed. And you think that's enough? Do you really believe his family will let this happen? They'll crush you, Emily, just like they did to us. At the Whitmore mansion, Nicholas stormed into his father's study, slamming the door behind him. Did you have Emily's family threatened? Are you having them evicted? Mr. Whitmore looked up from his desk, unfazed. I did what needed to be done. You're letting that girl cloud your judgment, Nicholas. She's a distraction, nothing more. Nicholas's fists clenched. She's not just some girl. I love her. His father scoffed. Love? You think that matters? Our family didn't build its empire on sentiment. You have responsibilities, Nicholas. You can't throw everything away for a girl who doesn't belong in our world. Nicholas stepped closer, his voice shaking with anger. If this is what it means to be a Whitmore, then I don't want any part of it. You don't have a choice, his father replied coldly. But Nicholas was already walking out, slamming the door behind him. The next day, Emily received an unexpected visitor, Mrs. Whitmore. The elegant woman stood at Emily's doorstep, her presence commanding yet surprisingly gentle. You must be Emily, she said, her voice calm but firm. May I come in? Emily hesitated but nodded, leading her into the modest living room. I've come to ask you something, Mrs. Whitmore began, sitting gracefully on the worn couch. Do you truly care for my son? Emily blinked, caught off guard. I do, but it's not that simple. Mrs. Whitmore nodded, her expression unreadable. I understand, but you need to know that loving Nicholas comes with a cost. His father won't stop until he gets what he wants. And if you stay in his life, you'll both suffer. Emily's chest tightened. So you're here to tell me to leave him? Mrs. Whitmore's eyes softened. No, I'm here to warn you. If you truly love him, you'll need to be strong enough to face what's coming. Because this fight won't be easy for either of you. Later that evening, Nicholas showed up at Emily's door, visibly shaken. Emily, we need to leave, he said. What? Why? My father, he's planning something. I don't know what, but I overheard him talking to his lawyer. He's trying to use some old loophole to seize your family's property again. Emily's heart sank. How can he still do this? You gave us the deed. Nicholas ran a hand through his hair. He's not after the land. He's after you. He thinks if he ruins you, I'll stop fighting him. Emily took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. Then we'll fight back. Together. Nicholas looked at her, admiration and love in his eyes. Are you sure? This could destroy everything? Emily nodded. I've already lost everything once. I'm not afraid to fight for what matters now. As Nicholas and Emily prepared to stand against Mr. Whitmore, Victor revealed another secret. He still had documents that could expose the illegal dealings that had built the Whitmore empire. But if you use these, Victor warned, It won't just hurt his father. It'll bring down the entire Whitmore family, including Nicholas. Emily hesitated. Could she risk destroying the man she loved to protect her family's future? Emily stared at the stack of documents Victor had laid on the table. They were old but damning proof of fraud, bribes, and land grabs that had built the Whitmore empire. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. With this, Victor said, we can take him down. Whitmore will lose everything. Nicholas stood silently across the room, his jaw clenched. He had known his father was ruthless, but seeing the evidence of his family's corruption laid bare was a blow he hadn't been prepared for. But it won't just ruin my father, Nicholas finally said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. It'll destroy the company, the people who work for us, the charities we support. Are we ready for that? Emily looked at him, torn. This is bigger than us, Nicholas. My family suffered because of your father's greed. How many others have been hurt the same way? Nicholas nodded. I know, and I want to make it right. But there has to be another way, one that doesn't destroy everything. Victor scoffed, spoken like a true Whitmore, always trying to protect your own. Nicholas turned to him, his eyes blazing. I'm not my father. Don't lump me in with him. Emily stepped between them, her voice firm. Stop. This isn't about pride or revenge. This is about justice. But we need to be smart about this. Emily spent the next few days working with Nicholas and Victor to come up with a plan. Instead of going public with the documents, they decided to use them as leverage. If Mr. Whitmore refused to stop his attacks on Emily's family, they would expose everything. But Mr. Whitmore wasn't one to back down. When Nicholas confronted him with the evidence, his father's reaction was colder than he had imagined. You think you can threaten me with this? Mr. Whitmore sneered, tossing the documents aside. Do you know how many times people have tried to bring me down? I always win, Nicholas. Always. Nicholas stood firm. Not this time. If you don't back off, these papers will go straight to the press, and when they do, the Whitmore name will mean nothing. For the first time, Mr. Whitmore hesitated. His son had always been obedient, a reflection of the Whitmore legacy. But now, standing before him, Nicholas was no longer a boy. He was a man, and he wasn't backing down. Just as it seemed the tide was turning in their favor, Emily discovered something shocking. Among her father's old belongings, she found a letter written to Victor, one that had never been sent. The letter revealed that Victor wasn't just an innocent victim of the Whitmore family's schemes. He had made a deal with Mr. Whitmore years ago, agreeing to sell out his own brother in exchange for money to escape his debts. Emily confronted Victor, her voice shaking. You betrayed us. You let my father lose everything so you could save yourself. Victor looked away, shame etched on his face. I made a mistake, Emily. I thought I could fix it later, but I was too late. Nicholas, who had overheard, stepped forward. And now you're trying to use me to settle your guilt? Victor glared at him. Don't act so righteous, Nicholas. You come from a family of thieves. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything. Emily raised her hand, silencing them both. This has to stop. We can't fix the past by tearing each other apart. We have to move forward. With tensions at their peak, Emily and Nicholas decided to meet Mr. Whitmore one last time. They brought the documents and Victor with them. I'm done playing games, Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. You're going to sign over the land you took from my family, and you're going to stop interfering in our lives. Mr. Whitmore smirked. And if I don't? Victor stepped forward, holding the most incriminating document. Then this goes public. All of it. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Whitmore entered. Enough, she said, her voice calm but commanding. Harold, you've done enough damage. Let it go. Her husband's face darkened. You're taking their side? I'm taking the side of decency, she replied. You've spent your life building an empire, but at what cost? If this is what it takes to protect our family, so be it. In the end, Mr. Whitmore begrudgingly agreed to their terms. The land was returned to Emily's family and the eviction notice was revoked. Nicholas, disillusioned with his father, chose to leave the family business and start fresh with Emily. But the biggest twist came when Victor, racked with guilt, decided to turn himself in for his role in the past betrayal. It's time I face the consequences, he told Emily, as Nicholas and Emily stood together. Watching the sunset over the land that had once torn their families apart, Nicholas took her hand. We can't change what happened, he said, but we can write a new story, together. And for the first time in years, Emily felt hope.